Alright, so this is a key to part A of simplifying radicals, and this is going to be 11.08. Alright, so number one, we want to simplify the square root of 28. Now, 28 is not a perfect square, but remember your perfect squares are 1, 4, 9, next one's 16, next one's 25, next one's 36, 49, and so on. So when you have a perfect square, you take the square root of a perfect square, you get a whole number back. So for example, 1's a perfect square, so the square root of 1 is 1. What number times itself is the radicand 1? So 1 times 1 is 1. The 4 is a perfect square, so the square root of 4 is equal to 2. Because 2 times 2 is 4. 9 is a perfect square, so the square root of 9 is 3. 3 times 3 is 9, and so on. Alright, so 28 is not listed in any of these because no whole number times itself is 28. Alright, so we want to ask ourselves, besides the number 1, what's the largest of these perfect squares, and there are an infinite number of those, it keeps on going. What's the largest perfect square that will go into 28? And so the answer is 4. So I can write square root of 28 as a square root of 4 times 7. And remember, the square root of 4 times 7, I can rewrite this as a product of two radicals. And so the square root of 4 is 2, so I get 2 square root of 7. So that's number 1. So 2 square root of 7. Number 2, you have the square root of 50. So again, 50 is not a perfect square, but 25 is the largest perfect square that goes into 50. So I can write this as 25 times 2. So I get the square root of 25 times the square root of 2, which is 5 square root of 2. And you can't simplify the square root of 2. So I get 5 square root of 2. Alright, number 3, you have the square root of 45. So, in number 3, the largest perfect square, besides 1, that goes into 45 is 9. So I can write this as the square root of 9 times 5. And the square root of 9 is going to be 3. So I get 3 square root of 5. So that's number 3. So 3 square root of 5. Alright, number 4, you have the square root of 98. Number 4, square root of 98. Alright, in some of these you may need to use your calculator, but besides 1, you need to find the largest. Always use the largest perfect square that will go to 98. If you don't use the largest, you're going to have a bunch of steps to deal with. So, let's see, if you say 98 divided by 4, you'll notice that you get a decimal. So that's not so 98. So 4 is not a perfect square that goes into 98 because you get a decimal. So then let's try the next one, 9. Obviously 9 is not going to work because of these two digits. Let's go to 16. So 98 divided by 16 is also a decimal. That's not going to work. So if you go to 36, so 98 divided by 36, again, so you keep doing that. It's not that many, and always go halfway to half of 98 to that perfect square. So 49, 98 divided by 49, you notice is 2. So that's a whole number. So you can use 2. So it'll be the square root of 49 times 2. The square root of 49 times the square root of 2. So you get 7 square root of 2. That's number 4. So number 4 is 7 square root of 2. Alright, number 5, if you look at number 5, there's really no work to do there because you notice that in number 5, 100 is a perfect square. So the square root of 100 is just 10. Alright, number 6, the square root of 300. Alright, well, we just talked about 100 being a perfect square, and you can see right away that 300 is going to be 100 times 3. So there's a square root of 100 times the square root of 3, so that's 10 square root of 3. Okay, number 7, you have the square root of 48. Okay, so 48 is not a perfect square, but besides 1 is their largest perfect square that goes into 48. So you may look at this, you may say, well, I can see that 4 is a perfect square, and 4 goes into both these digits, so 4 has to go into 48. So let's just look at that for a moment. So let's suppose we did say 4. So that's the square root of 4 times 12. Now, you can use 4, it's just not the perfect, it's just not the largest perfect square. So watch what happens. So when I do that, I'm going to get the square root of 4 times the square root of 12. Now the square root of 4 is 2, so I get 2 square root of 12. But you remember, you want to simplify this completely. So you want to simplify these radicals. So the square root of 4, I can still see that the perfect square 4, which is the largest in this case, that would go into 12. So I get 2 square root of 4 times 3, and so I get 2 times the square root of 4 times the square root of 3, and so the square root of 4 is 2, so I get this 2 times this 2, so this 2 times this 2 is 4, so I get 4 square root of 3. And so that's the answer to number 7. Now, if you had used the largest, now let's suppose you had still said 4. Now watch, you didn't have to go through all these steps. You could have easily realized what the largest would have been and gone directly to this. So let's say you said 4. Okay? And so you'll notice that right away you would have noticed, always look at this number. Can another perfect square go into it? Yes, 4. So 4 times 3. And so all you do is just take these two numbers, these two perfect squares, and multiply them together. 4 times 4 is 16. So it turns out that 16 is the largest perfect square. And so you just use it here. And so I get the square root of 16 times 3, which is the square root of 16 times the square root of 3, which is 4 square root of 3. And that's what we said it was. So 4 square root of 3. Alright, so that's number 7. 4 square root of 3. Number 8, you have the square root of 150. Well, 25 is the largest perfect square that goes in 150. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this as 25. And then if you don't know how many groups of 25 go to 150, use your calculator. But there are 4 groups of 25 into 100, and then 2 more into 50, so that should be 6. And so I get the square root of 25 times the square root of 6. Square root of 25 is 5, so you get 5 square root of 6. So that's number 8, 5 square root of 6. Okay, number 9, you have this. Number 9, you have the square root of 80. So the square root of 80. Alright, so again, use the largest perfect square. If you don't use the largest, use this idea here. You can go through all these steps, but try and use this idea here to try and find the largest. So let's see. I'm going to use the calculator to show you. So we know that 4 goes into 80. Alright, so I'm going to say 80 divided by 4. So that's what I get. Look at 20. What other perfect square goes into 20? The answer is 4. So this 4 times this 4 will give us 16. So I'm going to say 16, and then use your calculator. 80 divided by, 80 divided by 16, we get 5. So we 16 times 5. And the square root of 16, so I can rewrite this square root of a product as a product of the square roots. So the square root of 16 is 4, so you get 4 square root of 5. So that's number 9. So number 9 is 4 square root of 5. Okay, number 10, you have the square root of 125. Well, it's very similar to number 8, the square root of 150. So look at 25. So the square root of 25 would be 25 times 5. So there's the square root of 25 times the square root of 5, which is 5 square root of 5. Jumps to 10. 5 square root of 5. Number 11, you have the square root of 20. Well, 4 is going to be the largest perfect square that goes into 20. So we're going to say the square root of 4 times 5. And that's square root of 4 times square root of 5. So we get 2 square root of 5. So 2 square root of 5. Number 12, you have the square root of 24. So again, 4. So it'll be square root of 4 times 6. So that's 4 square root of 4 times square root of 6. So that's 2 square root of 6. So 12 is 2 square root of 6. Number 13, we have the square root of 27. All right, so 9 is going to be the largest perfect square that goes into 27, so that'll be the square root of 9 times 3. So the square root of 9 times the square root of 3, which is 3 square root of 3. Number 13 is 3 square root of 3. Okay, so there are two 13s, so this should be 14. So number 14, I'll put 13 again, since this was what we said. 13, you have the square root of 40. So again, 4 will go into 40, and that's going to be the largest. 4 times 10, so that'll be the square root of 4. Oops, right here. So it'll be the square root of 4 to the square root of 10, so it's 2 square root of 10. So 2 square root of 10. Okay, so that is the key to worksheet 11.0, Part A.